Hello everyone, I'm Kim and welcome to my sewing room. I hope you're all doing really well and have managed to get some sewing done this week. I have been thinking about sewing garments for the colder weather that is on its way. There is a definite nip in the air at the moment. The weather is starting to feel a bit cooler in the evenings and I'm really thinking about jackets. So last week I showed you some beautiful pink corduroy fabric which I had bought from the Sherwood's 50% discount sale, and when it arrived I wasn't too sure which jacket I was going to make, but I have decided that I want to make an itch to stitch a tennis jacket. And I thought I would use this video to go through the process that I follow when I make any garment. And the first question I ask myself is, have I made this before? And the answer to that is yes. I have made two of these tennis jackets before, and this was the last one that I made in this beautiful green corduroy, which I also bought off of Sherwood Fabrics. And this jacket is something that I always seem to pull out of the cupboard when I'm rushing off for a coffee or whatever. It's just a real go-to jacket, and I've had a lot of wear out of it since I made it last August, so it has been a really good make, so I thought I would make another one. Now, because I've made this before, I will refer back to my project sheet on it, and those of you that have followed me for a while will know that I have project sheets, and in this folder are all of the project sheets for the last 3 years worth of project sheets. So I will complete a project sheet for literally anything that I make, whether it's a garment, a cushion, a makeup bag, quilting, anything. It literally the details of it will go onto a project sheet so that I always have something to refer back on. So in here are all of the projects that I have worked on over the last 3 years. So with that said, I will go and find my project sheet for the last tennis jacket that I made. So I pulled out the sheet, and here it is. And this sheet is available somewhere on this video. You're very welcome to use it, but I will warn you, it's very detailed. I am a details person. I like making notes probably because I've got an atrocious memory. I can never remember what I've done on a previous make. So for me, this is a godsend. So on here I will have lots of information, so I will read through this thoroughly before I start even pattern placing the pieces on my fabric and cutting my fabric out, because there might be something on this sheet that suggests that I want to make an adjustment to the actual pattern. So I've read through this and I've made a few notes at the back, and so straight after finishing it I've put a note here at the bottom which says, next time cut a C cup, and I made this in a D cup, so obviously the bust area is quite big. And I've also mentioned that I want to increase the sleeve length by 1 inch. So they're the adjustments I want to make before I start cutting into this beautiful pink corduroy. So I'm going to stand up and show you jackets, my previous jacket, so you can see what it looks like and hopefully see why I've decided to make the changes that I am going to make. I probably lobbed my head off, so I apologise now, but here we go. So I always like to put on the previous garment so I can actually feel if there's any obvious changes that I want to make. So here is the bust. So I cut this jacket originally in a D cup, and it is quite big at the top, so I've decided to reduce the cup size to a C, and also the sleeves are just a tad too short and I want to increase them by an inch. Everything else is okay. When I first made my very first make of this, it was in black denim, and the pocket openings were very narrow, so I had actually increased these pockets already when I made this version, so I know that that change will have already been made on the pattern. But it's a really nice jacket. It's got beautiful orange top stitching, and I want to also do the top stitching again on my pink version, because obviously there are things that you also need to take into account, like your weight. My weight has changed quite a bit over the year, and sadly I put it on rather than lost it, but I just wanted to make sure that any new version that I make of this will still fit me now. So with reducing the bust size from a D to a C, I'm sure that will be just as nice fitting once I lose weight, and also with the length of the sleeves that should be okay as well, so I don't have a problem with making those adjustments. So the next step is I pull out a new project sheet and I will start to fill this out. So this is where I start my process. So I have started to write out my project sheet. So I've got the next project number on from the last one. 24 is just the year that I've made this project in. Small detail about the actual project, so it's itch to stitch a tennis pink, so it's a size 18 C cup, and it's just a top stitch jacket in pink corduroy. I would put other information in there, whether it was a first make like a twirl and a waist or hip measurement if I felt it was relevant to the pattern. In here I've just put that I've recut to a C cup, so I've checked the pattern, I've just recut the bust areas to a C cup, and I've also made sure that the sizing is 18. In here I will put fabric information, but I generally put that once I have scraps of fabric. So after I've cut the fabric out, I will put swatches of the fabric and interfacing, and I will complete that. Generally I find, because I plan out my layouts, I don't always use as much fabric as they recommend, and I like to make a note of that, because obviously if I come to make this again I can try and save myself a little bit of fabric, and hence a little bit of money, because I don't need as much fabric. I have what thread number I will use, needle choice and notion, so I'll make a note of whether I need buttons, etc. And on the back I write down what pieces, what pattern pieces are going to be lined, what are going to be interfaced, all the pattern pieces that are needed for this garment. There are a lot of pattern pieces to this garment, and these four in particular, which I have boxed here, are the C cup pieces. So I put all that information which I pulled out from the pattern instructions. I've got all of my pattern pieces here on the right, and because I want to make an adjustment also to the sleeves, because I want to increase them by an inch, I've got my sleeve patterns here. So I've got my sleeve patterns here, so I've cut them where the shorten and lengthen line is. I'm going to add an inch, and I've got the inch increase here, so I'm just basically going to get my sellotape, make sure the grain line is lined up, so I'm just going to draw my grain line across that inch. It, and then I can true up the pattern. So that's the inch increase in one part of this two-part sleeve. I'm going to do exactly the same with the other part. My two sleeve parts have now been extended by 1 inch. There are no other changes to be made, so now I can place all of these pattern pieces on the fabric and start moving them around to get as much out of the fabric as I can before I start cutting. So I've laid all of the pattern pieces on the fabric, and I don't usually follow the recommended layout. What I like to do is I like to lay the pattern pieces out as initially suggested by the pattern, and then I'll start moving things around because I want to try and get as much out of the fabric as I can. Now, because I've made this jacket before, I know that I can cut it out using less fabric. So, and that's what I've done. So when I ordered this fabric, I only ordered 2 meters where you needed 2 meters 10. I know it's not a big difference, but it just means I'm not wasting fabric, any more fabric than I need to. So I've managed to shrink it down slightly. And what I do is when I follow a layout, so on this pattern you can see that they have this recommended layout here, and underneath I've just put how I lay out my pattern pieces. Obviously you don't need to do that, it's just me being fussy, but I will do that. I thought whilst I was cutting out this corduroy that I would mention the pile, the natural nap of the fabric, that corduroy has a pile, so when you stroke it down it is smooth. So all the pattern pieces have been placed on the fabric so that they all run in the same direction. But this piece here is the upper collar, so I've had to turn over this pattern piece because I want the pile of the corduroy to work its way down to the bottom of the pattern piece so it runs smooth. And the same goes for the under collar. The under collar is cut on the bias, but I want that pile to go down, so it's down and works down to the bottom of that collar, so it's all in the right direction, so it's all flowing right, so there's nothing that's going to resist. So that is how I lay out all of my pattern pieces before I cut. And before I cut, I just literally look at every single pattern piece to make sure that I only need 2 of each. Sometimes pattern pieces can trip you up a bit, because this one, for instance, it says you have to cut 4. Now obviously this is a small pattern piece, so that wouldn't be difficult to find extra fabric to cut out such a small pattern piece. But sometimes if you're told you have to cut out a bigger pattern piece and you're not aware of it, you suddenly run out of fabric, and I've done that before. So I always just double check. I go over the pattern and I just make sure that I've cut out all of my relevant pattern pieces and the numbers of how many I need to cut as well. So I have done that. So all of the fabric is now cut. The next thing is to cut the lining. So the lining, I have found this fat quarter in my stash and it matches my corduroy lovely, and I've cut out the internal pocket lining, the pocket flap. Now I'm putting a lining on mine rather than making out of fabric both the exterior and interior of the flap. I'm going to put the lining on the interior of the flap, the underneath of the flap, which is this thing here, because I just want to add a flash of colour, but you won't be able to see it from the front. And also the pocket lining. So this fat quarter has worked really well, and that's out of my stash, so that means I haven't had to go and buy some additional fabric to do that. So that's the lining. So with all of that done, I've now completed more of my project sheet. So I've got my swatches on here. I've also included some interfacing. So the interfacing for this jacket, I've decided to use Shape Flex 101. It's a little bit thicker than the normal interfacing that I use, which is G710. I just wanted something with a little bit more structure, because obviously with this being a jacket, I've decided to put on these jean buttons, and they will need quite a strong, stiff interfacing to make sure that they don't pull through. So I've decided on a thicker interfacing, and that's a Shape Flex 101. So I've made a note of that, and when I come to cutting out the interfacing, I will use that. I've also put some information on here about the fabric. So the fabric it suggested was 2 meters 10 of 135 meter wide fabric. I've used 2 meters of 150, and I've managed to get the jacket out quite nicely within that amount of fabric. And this fabric is 98% cotton and 2% stretch. And I do like a bit of stretch in my jackets. I just feel you have a little bit of movement in them. So I'm quite pleased that that's got a bit of stretch in, and I've started to build up my little list of notions. So I know my notions, I have top stitch thread, and I have to decide what colour I want my top stitch thread. So I haven't decided on that yet. So I've just made a note of that, because that will remind me when I come to buy in any additional notions that I need for this project. I just need to check my stash to see whether I've got enough of these jean buttons that I use. These have been put on by a green machine, and they have worked really well on this jacket. On my first denim jacket, I used the screw-in ones, and I did find on numerous occasions that I kept on losing them. So I invested in a die set and some jean buttons, and these have been put on with a green machine, and they don't move. I'm really pleased with them. So I'll just check that I've got enough of those for this jacket. And also whether I want to use a coordinating overlocker serger thread. Now my overlocker threads, I haven't got many colours, and the nearest colour to pink is red, and I don't know whether I want a red, because you will see the inside of it, and I don't know whether I want red overlocking or serging showing on the inside. So I have to make a decision whether I want to buy some additional thread for that. So project sheet's coming along nicely. On the back I've just put the additional information that I increased the sleeve length by 1 inch, and that the pattern piece has already been adjusted for that, and that I used a different pattern layout, and the instructions for that are actually on the pattern. So we are nearly coming to an end. The last thing I do is generally make sure that I have some thread in stock, and I have my little bag here of all my pink and red threads, and I have tried to match up some of those threads, and none of them actually match very well. They're too light. So I have a Gutermann thread guide. So I've picked out the appropriate colour from here, and I've made a note of that on the project sheet, and I will purchase some thread for that. Once I've got everything, I generally will then start sewing, because I don't like to sew until I have everything in place, because I don't like to be interrupted through my sewing process. So I will send off for those few things. Usually they only take a few days to come through, and then I can get cracking with this project. So I think for today that is it. I hope you've enjoyed the content, and if you would like to use my project sheet, it is somewhere in the description. Go and help yourself to it. I have found it's a godsend. I love referring back to previous makes of things that I have made, because I trace off all of my patterns. It also will tell me where I've made adjustments. For instance, on this pattern piece here, I've actually made a note here because this is my internal pocket to this jacket, and I've actually made a note on the actual pattern piece saying that I have made this bigger because I've made the opening of my pocket wider so I can get my hands in, because I have quite big hands. And I have found that just by making that adjustment to the pattern piece and adding that information onto the project sheet helps me when I come to make this jacket again. I know exactly what adjustments I've made. And to be honest with you, now I'm on my third make of this jacket. Usually by the time I'm on a third make, I have got the fit just right. So I'm hoping that this jacket will be perfect, and that will be my template to make these jackets going forward without making any other adjustments. If you want to use my project sheet, please do it. It is somewhere on this video. It is on all of my videos, so go and help yourself. It is something that I do tweak occasionally, so it does change over time. It is quite detailed, and there are probably elements of it that you won't use, but it is a great reference point. And as you can see from my project sheet folder, I have 3 years worth of these project sheets, and I'm always referring back to them, and they have helped me. I can't tell you how many times they have helped me with getting a better fit and understanding pattern layouts and little things really that generally I would try to remember, but because of my atrocious memory I can't. So the project sheet for me has been a really useful tool in my sewing room. So please go and help yourself to it. It's always there. I do adjust it from occasion, so if you think of something you'd like me to add to it, I'm quite happy to listen to your comments and adjust if necessary. So I hope you've enjoyed the content of this video, and I will see you all very soon. Take care.